Lesson 2. The elements of a simple sentence. We have seen in the previous lesson that a simple sentence in general contains two main parts, the subject and the predicate. In this lesson, we are going to focus on other elements within these two parts. We can find 5 types of elements within a simple sentence. The subject, S, the verb, V, the object, O, the complement, C, and the adverbial, A. The two main elements which are obligatory are the subject and the verb. We can never find a simple sentence without a subject and a verb. The other elements, the object, the complement, and the adverbial, sometimes are found and sometimes they are not. The subject. The subject of a sentence is the person or thing the sentence is about. The underlined parts in the following examples are subjects. He bought a delicious cake. Birds eat berries. A jeep is my first choice. The speed of light is 186,000 miles a second. The soldiers are brave. The Taj Mahal is one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. Sticks and stones broke his bones. We notice in these examples that the subjects come before the verbs in sentences. This is in the English language. Other languages may have the subject in other positions. There is an exception in English about the position of subjects. Here it is the case of questions and after the expletive there, and we have seen this in the previous lesson. For example, an example of a question: was the statement true? We see that the subject and the auxiliary are inverted. So, the verb comes before the subject. There is a problem. Here, the subject of this sentence is a problem. The second element is the verb. Let's start from the examples. John arrived early. Mary feels happy. The buildings are very high. The bus was leaving the terminal. Grandma may come tonight. Mary has been waiting for the reply for many days. The boots must have been being shipped. They may have been preparing the room. We notice in these examples that the verb comes after the subject. Another remark is that the verb element is not necessarily one word. It depends on the tense of the sentence. Sometimes we have one word, sometimes we have 2 words, 3 words, or 4 words. This depends on the tense of the sentence. We notice in the first 3 examples that we have only one word. It is the main verb. But in the other examples we have more. There is a rule here. In the English language, we have the VP or the verb phrase. So in order to speak about the verb element, we say the verb phrase, VP. The VP should have or must have a main verb. This is a necessary element. We see here in the box a main verb. Sometimes the main verb is preceded by auxiliaries. 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 auxiliaries. In the English language, we can have up to 4 auxiliaries before the main verb. Concerning the meaning of the verb, sometimes it expresses an action, like to arrive or to leave, to come, to wait, to prepare, etc. These are action verbs. It can also express a sensation or a feeling, like the verb to feel. And thirdly, it can express a state of being, like the verb to be, or the verb to seem or to appear. Now we summarize what a verb is. The verb expresses an action, a sensation, or a state of being. It can be a single word, one word, or a verb phrase, many words, consisting of a main verb and up to 4 auxiliaries. We call them auxiliaries or helping verbs. Of course, the auxiliaries come before the main verb. Here we should also make a little remark concerning the main verb. Sometimes the main verb has an ending, like ed, ing, s. This depends on the tense of the verb, whether it is a simple, a perfect, or a continuous tense. We may ask ourselves about the rest of the sentence. What comes after the verb? Do we have one element, 2, 3, or what elements exactly? This depends on the type of the verb. So the choice of the verb determines what other elements are used in the object. There are 2 types of objects in English: the direct object and the indirect object. First, the direct object. The symbol is OD, capital O, small d. Now the direct object is the person or thing directly affected by the action of a verb. We take the examples. The child lost her ball. What did the child lose? She lost her ball. The child lost what? Her ball. Her ball is directly affected by the action of the verb to lose. We take the second example in the same way. John invited his friends. How can I find the direct object? First, I look at the verb, which is always transitive. John invited whom? He invited his friends. His friends is the direct object. It is directly affected by the action of inviting. The third example, the lion killed the man. The lion killed whom? The man. So the man is the direct object. It is directly affected by the action of killing. I saw Mom and Dad. I saw whom? Mom and Dad. So Mom and Dad, it is compound here, is the direct object. Finally, we invited all our friends. We invited whom? All our friends. So all our friends is the direct object. In all these examples, the verb is transitive. Now to find the direct object, first find the verb, then ask whom or what after it. The second type of object is the indirect object. Let's take an example. Mother told her children the story. We notice here in this sentence that there is a direct object first. The mother told what? The mother told the story. So the story is the direct object. This means that the indirect object is always used with the direct object. They go together. We have 2 objects in the sentence. We return. Mother told her children the story. The mother in this sentence told the story to someone. So the one who receives the action of telling the story is her children. This is called the indirect object. So we go to the definition. The indirect object, OI, capital O, small I, is an animate being. It means a human being or an animal, which is the receiver of the action. In other words, the person to whom or for whom the action is done. And there is always a direct object with the indirect object in the sentence. I return to my sentence. Mother told her children the story. Mother told what? The story. To whom? Who received the action of telling the story? Her children. Right. We can say also, mother told the story to her children. It means we reverse the position of the direct and the indirect objects, and this is correct. Now, her children is always the indirect object, even if we change its position. We take another example. The coach gave Melissa another chance. Let's try to find the direct object and the indirect object. The direct object is the person or thing which is directly affected by the action. We can find it by asking who or what after the verb. And the indirect object is the receiver of the action. Let's try to apply this on the example. The coach gave what? The coach gave another chance. Another chance is the direct object. To whom? To Melissa. So Melissa is the indirect object. The sentence can be said in another way. The coach gave another chance to Melissa. So in this case, when we put the direct object before the indirect object, we are obliged to use to. And sometimes we use for. To or for. Some verbs are used with to and others are used with for. The third example, Mary bought Fred a sandwich. Mary bought what? She bought a sandwich. So a sandwich is the direct object. For whom? For Fred. Fred is the receiver of the action. Fred is the indirect object. So Mary bought a sandwich for Fred. Mary bought a sandwich, direct object, for Fred, indirect object. The last example, Paul gave it to her. Paul gave it to her. Here, the direct object is it, and the indirect object is her. In this case, we cannot reverse because we are using a pronoun. Now we summarize. The sentences which contain an indirect object firstly have a transitive verb, and secondly they have a direct object. We can never speak about an indirect object without a direct object. They always go together. We have a subject plus a verb plus the first object, then the second object. You see in this table the verbs which are used with to and those which are used with for. For instance, we take bring. To bring something to someone. To give something to someone. To hand something to someone. And so on. The verbs which are used with for, to book. The verb to book means to reserve. To book a room, for instance, in a hotel. To book a room for someone. To build a house for someone. To buy something for someone. And so on. The second exercise, underline the object pronouns used as direct object. In these sentences, there is a direct object, but it is not a noun or a noun phrase. It is a pronoun, an object pronoun. An example, Mr. and Mrs. Huan found it. What did they find? They found it. It is the direct object. You are asked to do the same in the rest of sentences. Notice that in the simple sentences, sometimes we find direct objects in the form of a gerund or an infinitive. Look at the first example. Mr. Adler enjoys baking. What does Mr. Adler enjoy? He enjoys baking. Baking is the direct object. In the second example, Mrs. Potter plans to bake for the party. What does Mrs. Potter plan? She plans to bake. This is the direct object. The next exercise, circle the direct object in each sentence. Write N if it is a noun, write P if it is a pronoun, write G if it is a gerund, and write I if it is an infinitive. So we have different types of objects in these sentences. You just circle the direct object and show its type. Now let's move on to see some exercises about the indirect object. But before doing this, we'll revise the difference between the direct object and the indirect object. Look at the sentence. Mr. Simpson is buying a sweater. What is Mr. Simpson buying? A sweater. This is a direct object, and the sentence ends here. There is no other element. The second example, Mr. Simpson bought his dog a sweater. Now we see the same verb, and there is a direct object in the sentence, which is a sweater. This is the thing which is directly affected by the action of buying. Now, what is the receiver of the action of buying? It is his dog. The action is done for him, or for it in that case. So his dog is the indirect object. The indirect object is the person or the animate element for whom or to whom the action is done. Exercise. Circle the noun or pronoun used as the indirect object. Look at the example. They wrote as a letter. They wrote what? A letter. Direct object. For whom or to whom? To as. As is the indirect object. You do the same in the following sentences. Another exercise here is on the indirect object. Now let's try to test whether you are able to see whether there is an indirect object in the sentence or there is no indirect object in the sentence. You read the following sentences, and then if you find that the sentence contains an indirect object, you put a tick. If not, you don't put the tick. An example is done for you. Mr. Reynolds took a walk. Here there is no indirect object, there is no tick. The carpenter built his wife a bookshelf. What did the carpenter build? He built a bookshelf. For whom? For his wife. So there is an indirect object plus a direct object. So in that case you have to put a tick. You try to do the same thing in the following sentences and test yourself. This is the last exercise on direct and indirect objects. You are asked to write your own sentences. So write 2 sentences with a direct object. This means that the sentence will contain a subject, a verb, and an object, a direct object. Then write 2 sentences with a direct and an indirect object. It contains the subject, the verb, the first object, then the second object. Here in this second part, it is not important whether the direct object comes before or after the indirect object. You are free. But just pay attention. In some cases, you are obliged to use 2 or 4, and sometimes you are not obliged to use them. This depends on the position of the direct and indirect objects, whether they come before or after each other. The complement. C. The complement is another element of the simple sentence. Complements in general complete the meaning of either the subject or the object. Therefore, we can say that there are two types of complements: subject complements and object complements. Let's take the first type, subject complements. Look at the examples. She is a doctor. The bull became angry. He went mad. They got tired. He grew fat. The sky turned black. In each of these examples, there is an element which describes the subject. It completes the meaning of the subject. In sentence 1, for instance, a doctor is related to she. It adds something about she. The bull became angry. Angry is related to the bull. He went mad. Mad is related to he, or it describes he. It completes the meaning of he. The same thing is found in the rest of sentences. So, the subject complement in these sentences sometimes is a noun phrase, like in example 1, she is a doctor. And sometimes it is an adjective, as it is the case in sentence 2, angry or mad, tired, fat, black. All these are subject complements. We notice in sentences which have a subject complement that there is a verb which is called a linking verb. The most important linking verb is the verb to be. She is a doctor. The verb to be links the subject and its complement. There are two categories of linking verbs. They are listed here. To be, to appear, to lie, to remain, to stay, smell, sound, taste, feel, seem, look, rest, stand. All of them express a state. For example, I say, he seems happy. She looks angry today. They express a state. The second category of verbs, of linking verbs, express a result. The first verb is to become, like the bull became angry. This indicates a change of state or a result. The same thing can be said about the verb to come. For instance, my dream came true. To get, the sky got dark. To go, he went mad. To grow, he grew fat. To fall, he fell asleep. To run and to turn in the same way. So they indicate a change of state. All of them are linking verbs. The second type of complement is the object complement. This complement describes the object. It means that in the sentence there is a direct object. The object complement is a word which completes the meaning of the direct object. It describes it in some way. For example, they made John angry. They made whom? They made John. Then angry. Angry is about John. They elected him president. They elected whom? They elected him. President is about him. We summarize. An object complement adds to the meaning of the direct object. It helps to complete the meaning of such verbs as make, name, elect, find, consider, also call. For example, they named their baby Helen. I found him very smart. They consider her a good mother. The adverbial a. Examples: I stayed quietly at home all day. She phoned me this morning. They came rapidly. Mary will return in the afternoon. Adverbials in general add more information about the situation. For example, they add information about time, or place, location, or manner. If we take the first example, I stayed quietly at home all day. Quietly is a word which shows the manner. At home shows the place, and all day shows the time. So there are types of adverbials. You notice that the adverbial can be one word, like quietly or rapidly, or it can be a phrase like at home, all day, this morning, in the afternoon, especially a prepositional phrase. So we can say that adverbials have two types: adverbs, which consist of a single word, or adverb phrases, which consist of many words. Examples of adverbs are nearly, yesterday, unfortunately, very quickly, there, outside, today, yet, still, never, however, etc. Adverb phrases most of the time are prepositional phrases, like in the Times, the other day, with his new rod, through the woods, by the television. You notice that in a simple sentence, it is possible to find more than one adverbial in the simple sentence, in one sentence. Exercise. In this exercise, you will practice or try to find all the elements that we have described before: the subject, the verb, the object, or adverbial. So the question is, divide each of the sentences below into its parts and label or name each part S, V, O, or A. Now we come to a very important part of the lesson, which is the types of the simple sentence, or the patterns of the simple sentence. According to the elements which exist in a simple sentence, we can categorize it, or we classify it. Here we can say that there are 7 types of simple sentences, depending on the elements which exist in them. The first type, a subject plus a verb, and no other element exists in the sentence. In that case, the verb is intransitive. It does not need any other element to complete it. For example, John arrived. He died. These are intransitive verbs. 2. Subject plus verb plus object, direct object, alone. John sent the letter. 3. A subject plus a verb plus a complement. Here, this is a sentence with a linking verb. And type 2 is a sentence with a transitive verb. So I return to type 3. John seems or is happy. There is a linking verb and there is a subject complement. 4. A subject plus a verb plus an adverbial. This is type 1 plus adverbial. John writes well. Number 5. Subject plus verb plus object plus object. Here, this is a sentence with two objects, a direct and an indirect object. John gave Sarah a pen, or John gave a pen to Sarah. Number 6. Subject plus verb plus object plus complement. Here, this complement describes the object. Like, John considers Peter a hero. Hero describes Peter. Finally, we have the 7th type, subject plus verb plus object plus adverbial. This is type 2 plus an adverbial. John sent the letter immediately. Now we come to the last point in this lesson, which is an exercise of writing. We will practice writing the different types of sentences. Exercise 1. Write sentences, at least one sentence, using the following elements. Try as many verbs as possible. You write a sentence with a direct object, another sentence with an indirect object, a last sentence with an intransitive verb. The second exercise, write sentences using the following elements. A subject complement. It means that you should use a linking verb, one of the verbs that I have listed. Another sentence with the object complement, and finally, a sentence with an adverbial or many adverbials. Finally, write examples in which you illustrate the 7 patterns of the simple sentence. So you write an example about each type of the 7 types.